Bible does
That
condone
does not
slavery.
mean that
Paul
that
told
I
slaves
agree
to
with
obey.
instituting slavery.
But
Of
that's
course
not what I said.
Of
I
course
said the
not.
Bible condones slavery.
The Bible does not condone slavery, but let's take a look at his argument.
You said no, it doesn't. I brought
It
the
doesn't.
passage where Paul says slaves obey your masters.
It doesn't.
You said I agree with the Bible.
He does
you
not
see
say in the
circular
book of
logic,
Philemon.
right?
And
So his argument is that because Paul tells slaves to obey their masters, that the Bible condones slavery. There's a couple problems with this. One is that Paul is writing letters and his intent is to spread the gospel and help churches live out following Jesus in their context, not social and political reformation. At this time, Paul's a leader in a very small group, so he's not trying to change the laws of the land. He's helping Christians operate within them. The second problem is the text itself. Paul does give guidelines for slaves to obey their masters, but at the end of the passage, he says, "Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there's no partiality with him." Paul literally tells the masters to treat the slaves the same way the slaves treat the masters. Because Paul can't abolish slavery, but what he can do is help these Christians in their context actually live out what it means to follow Jesus.
in the book of Philemon, what happens in the book of Philemon? Do you know?
Now, Ali then brings up the book of Philemon because when there's a practical example, Paul actually asked this man to set his slave free, to not view him as a slave, but to actually view him as a brother. Now, let me be clear, the Bible does have slavery in it, and there are passages in the Old Testament that make it permissible. That does not mean that the Bible is condoning it. Those do not equivocate. And so there's a few things to consider here. The first is that the Old Testament law is not a law for all people at all times. In fact, it was meant to be temporary as they looked forward to a new covenant. Because in this new covenant, in the kingdom of God that Jesus is ushering, he actually flips this concept of slavery on its head. He says that it's the greatest that must be the servant, that it's who's first among you that must be the slave, and that Jesus himself, the Son of God, is the prime example as one who came not to be served, but to serve. When we look at the scriptures as a whole, we see that slavery is not in God's ideal for humanity. There is no slavery in the Garden of Eden. All men and all women are made in God's image equally. And in the new heavens and the new earth, there is no slavery, but all are sons and daughters of God reigning with him. Because the Bible does not condone slavery. In fact, it's because of Christians and the Christian worldview that slavery has been abolished in the Western world.